The Notion API supports database templates right now. That's a pretty big deal for developers using the Notion API because we can use templates very easily with just one parameter to apply page content to pages created via automations. This simplifies a lot automations because now we can create pages and append content using a single parameter without the need to use all the different block types to apply page content. In this video, I'm going through the new API endpoints and parameters about Notion database templates that we can use right now in the latest API version with data sources. Here is a demo. That is a meetings data source. It contains two templates. One is the default template and another is a weekly stand-up template. In this data source, there are no meetings scheduled for today. Now I will run the automation to schedule a meeting for today, applying the weekly stand-up template. When I go back to Notion, I can see the meeting sample created right here and the template applied automatically. Here in the Notion API documentation, there is a step-by-step guide explaining exactly how to use the template parameter when creating pages in Notion data sources. So if we look at specifically step 2 in this guide, it is create a page using a template, and it explains that we need to use this parameter and then either provide none, or if it is omitted, that's the default parameter value. That means the page created will be empty, no content inside. Or we can apply the default template if there is one in the data source, then this applies the default template. Or we can provide the specific template ID that we wish to apply. We can get the IDs of templates from a dedicated endpoint. I will go through this later in the video. We can also copy the template ID directly from Notion because each page in Notion has the URL where you can find the ID of that page. One thing that is worth noting and that I found pretty interesting is in this question right here. Can I use any page as a template? And interestingly, the answer is yes. We don't need to actually use a template ID. We can use any ID of a Notion page as long as the connection has access to it. That's always assumed in API integrations. That's pretty curious because it means that we can use any Notion page and essentially replicate the content on that page in the newly created page with just one parameter. This is incredibly powerful. Let's look at how I set up the automation. The first thing to notice is the data source. This is called meetings. It is a data source and I can get the data source ID in here from manage data sources, 3 dots, copy data source ID. And this follows the new structure in Notion. That is, one database can contain one or multiple data sources. So that's how to retrieve the ID. We can't retrieve the ID of a data source directly from the URL anymore because the URL contains the ID of the database, which is different from the data source. Keep that in mind. I found that to be a point of confusion for me at the beginning as I started to use the new API version that was released in September 2025. The second thing to know is that this data source has 2 templates which I created here from the new template option. The first one is a default template, which means if I go here and I create a new page, that template is automatically applied. You can see it is a template because it has some predefined properties populated already, and it has the page body already populated as well with some text and a linked database view of tasks related to this meeting. So we can quickly add action items or easily drag and drop them from the notes, for example. Then there is a different template that's for weekly stand-ups that also has some pre-applied properties and a slightly different page content with the AI meeting notes block as well, where you can transcribe the meeting and then get an AI summary from it, while also manually taking notes easily from here. Now, this is a make scenario. You can build this in any automation tool. This is using the Notion API fundamentally, so it doesn't matter what tool you use. This is demo in Make. Applying the database template when creating a page is not supported natively in the Notion modules that I can find here. So that is why I'm using the make an API call module. That's under the Notion app. When I scroll all the way down, that is make an API call. This allows me to customize the API call as I like, using any API endpoint from the Notion API, while at the same time I don't need to include the authentication in the headers or following the instructions because it is attached automatically by Make based on the connection that I create here easily. So I just need to enter the URL. This is the path relative to api.notion.com. In this case, I'm using v1/pages. It is a post request because I want to create a page. That's where the template application applies. So this is the only use case where you want to apply a template to a page right now. The Notion version is the latest one, September 2025. Content type, application/JSON, and then there is the body of the request. Of course, this is documented in the Notion API that you can find here. And when you go up, also in the guide, there is directly the link to the create a page endpoint documentation right here that explains everything. So I'm not going to go into details about that. I'm just going to focus on the template application. So the body is JSON. The first parameter is parent, and this contains type, data source ID, because we are creating a page in a data source. And then the data source ID is this one. I pasted it after copying it from Notion, just like I showed you a few moments ago. This can be dynamic, of course. It depends on your use case. Right now, I'm focusing on the template application. But before creating a page in Notion, very likely you will have other steps in your automation. For example, in a meetings use case, you might want to sync Google Calendar to Notion. And so you might have the watch events from Google Calendar. You might want to search the event in Notion if it already exists. If it doesn't exist, then you might have a route that creates the page. If it exists, maybe there is another route that updates the page. If it is deleted, it deletes the page. So the use case is very customizable based on your needs. And the second parameter in the body is template. So this is what it looks like. Template. This is a collection. So I'm going to include the type parameter. In this case, I'm using a specific template ID, and then I specify the template ID is this one. I got the template ID manually in the UI, although we can also get it via the API. So in here, if I go to edit the template, now I'm on the template page. And when I open it, the URL of this page contains the ID. This is the idea, the random string at the end of the page. So I copy this one and then use that as the parameter value in the API request. Last, there is the properties parameter that includes all the properties that we want pre-populated at page creation by the API. In my case, I just want the name populated because I know that the date will be automatically applied via the template here. So I don't need to populate that. I don't want to populate the participants, the contacts, the projects, although that is all possible and you can find out how to do that if needed. So that's all there is to the body of the request. The documentation explains that if I want to apply a default template in here, then I can just do template. I would remove the template ID and then here it would be default. And this applies the default template. Alternatively, here I could do none and this applies no template, meaning the page is blank. And then if you want to populate the page manually via the API request, then you can include here the children parameter. So you will do children and then include everything that's needed there, that's documented in the API using all the blocks that you wish to use. Last, you could also not include the template parameter at all, like this, because it is optional. So if you do this, then the page body will be empty. That's all there is to it. Now, two more things. The first thing is, in my case, the template was applied very quickly. So as soon as the page was created, the template was there. But the documentation explains that there can be a delay in the application of a template. So you create the page via the API, the template is applied asynchronously via Notion's internal system, so all the blocks are appended. I believe this applies to more complex templates that have many blocks to apply and that can take more time. So when that is the case, if you have other actions that you need to do via the API, for example, here you can have other steps after you create the page in Notion. You might update a certain page, etc., whatever you need. If that's the case, then you might want to apply step 3 carefully. Confirm page contents are ready. So you can set up a workspace webhook that looks at the page content updated events, listen for those, and then once the template is applied on the newly created page, you will receive the webhook and then you can process that data. So keep this in mind. It is a more niche use case, in my opinion, and experience, but still worth mentioning here. Last thing that you want to know is that we can also list the data source templates via the API. This outputs all the templates available in a data source. In my case, it would list the new meeting default template and the weekly stand-up on this data source because these are the two templates that I have. So if you want to do that, to dynamically retrieve templates before applying them, then you can use this API request. v1 data sources, the ID of the data source, and then /templates, same Notion version, and there is no need to provide any body or any parameter in the request. And this outputs all the templates in the data source, including their ID, their name, and whether they are default. Also notice that you can filter templates by name by using the query parameter. Also using the page size if you wish to limit the number of results, and the start cursor if you wish to paginate through items. So you start from the third item in the list, for example. Practically, in Make, you will still use the make an API call, and you would use that URL right here. Same Notion version, that's the latest one. The method will be get, and then you don't need the body. You can provide query string parameters, as I mentioned. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you want to work together, please submit the form in the description of this video, where you can also find all my products and resources. If you have any questions or thoughts, leave a comment below, and I will be happy to interact. See you in the next one.